Hello, and welcome to one of my favorite compositions I've made, Constellations. Constellations is what is known as a generative composition. I guess you can also call it like a generative patch of sorts. The way I could explain generative music is that it's a computer that is programmed to make music. Just a quick side note, when I said computer, I meant to say any sort of electronic means of making music, but the way that it's programmed allows it to kind of generate the music on its own. While it is using a set instruction, it doesn't necessarily have to follow a strict timeline. So it kind of makes the music on its own. I got into generative music via some YouTube videos. The most notable one for me was this one made by Andrew Huang, where he explored different techniques into making generative music, and I just found it very inspiring and wanted to try it myself because it looked fun. I'm using two different programs to create the music. The first program is creating all the notes, and that one is midinous. I actually made a video explaining this program a little bit before. The second program is VCV Rack, which is making all of the sounds, and kind of wanted to break down how this composition is made and how each of the different components work, because just kind of looking at it, it looks a little bit confusing, but if I explain some things, it'll make sense. Let's start with midinous, which is creating all of the notes. Here there's three different node fields. I like to call them constellations because that's where the song came from. They kind of look like constellations when you connect all the stars together, and so I was like, you know what, that's a good name for the song. This whole constellation on the left is creating the melody. If I start up the patch, we can listen to it. About every second or two, the constellations get activated via this little electric beam. This little electric pulse goes through each of these different constellations, and as it passes through each of these nodes, a different note is activated. There's 4 different paths that the melodic constellation can go through. The most common one that it'll go through is this little fork right here, the one labeled in red right now. And it's kind of like the base, it's just kind of like a foundation that the melody can kind of go along. By having this foundation set, you can allow the piece to evolve a little bit more via the other branches that I have set. These other 3 are a lot more complex than this branch, because this one is just kind of going between 2 different notes. But all these other ones kind of go into different spots. The electric pulse branches out into multiple different things, and it goes all over the place. And so by having this variety in the melody, it can really evolve and kind of grow into a different feeling over time. Because sometimes it just plays the simple melody, but other times it can go into the more complex branches all the time, and it can create a lot of chaos. So the piece can really evolve on its own depending on what the electric pulse decides to take, which path it decides to take. The constellation in the middle is the bass line, and it's the smallest and most basic kind of because you can't really have a bass line that's going all over the place. This one's a lot more simple, although the pulse has more paths that I can kind of go down. It's just that each of these paths are usually only like 1 or 2 notes. In fact, one of these branches just goes to a mute, so it doesn't play anything. The right constellation is a little more complicated. It'd be easier to explain by looking at the thing that it's controlling. This bottom patch down here is what I like to call the bleep bloops. I kind of also have like its little name calling it the constellation background. It just like has this very interstellar feeling. Like it just feels like stars. I don't know how to explain it. It's basically this synthesizer that's just kind of pulsing very rapidly. It kind of changes a little bit, but it's basically just pulsing at this rapid rate. And so what the right constellation is doing is it's changing the note that this synth is pulsing at. It's cool, it's fun, it's it adds so much to this piece, and it's just kind of like doing these cool little things. This one's the most complicated of all the constellations, and I think it's mainly, I've done it that way so that the, because the synth in the background is like kind of feeling very random and sporadic, having the notes change so suddenly can allow it to feel a little more alive. It feels a lot more dynamic doing it this way rather than having it more simple. Something that's kind of cool about the bleep bloops in the background is I have this whole patch connected to my MIDI keyboard, and so I have the knobs able to change the rate at which it pulses and the frequency it does. It's pretty fun to do that. Something that can really elevate this piece is including automation into the process. If you look at the midinous board, next to the clock that I have set down here is these little nodes right here. And when I have them connected to the line, what it'll do is it'll automate the volume of every single segment of this song. The volume of everything just kind of like goes in and out and fluctuates from time to time. There's also a function here where once this note is played, everything drops out except for the background, the bleep loops. And it just kind of goes for like a couple of clock cycles, and I find it really fun to just kind of drop everything out and leave you with just the background for a little bit. It's like a little break, and then everything comes back slowly. I'm not just letting this run for like 30 minutes at a time. What I can also do is manually control it using my keyboard. Show you, I got like a ton of different knobs that I can use and whatnot. And so I have a couple of faders that are controlling the level of the bass, the melody, and also the bleep bloops. When I recorded this patch for my album, I ended up kind of doing a little bit of manual mixing so that it could be a little more interesting with only 6 minutes of time to spare. It's a cool song, but you don't really see like the full like breadth of it until 10-ish minutes in. So I kind of did like some mixing to make it more interesting for the album. I'm also able to control the timbre of the melody. I have some plugins all the way up here, and by turning them up, they kind of add more chaotic energy to the melody. They just add a bunch more high end. And when I drop them down, it's a lot more mellow. And then as well, I also mentioned I'm able to modify what the bleep bloops are doing in the background using some knobs. And so by being able to like manually control and automate some of the parts of this album, or by some of the parts of this recording, of this composition, it sounds a lot more interesting. It's fun to mess around with too, kind of like doing some live mixing of this song. It starts to sound very alive. It just kind of does its thing. Like, I don't know how to explain it. It's just fun to put in the background because it's always making something new. It's really fun to watch too, especially the node tree.